Hello and welcome to today's session on applications designed for change. Today we're going to explore some of the factors that are contributing to development organizations looking for ways to be more agile in dealing with business change and some new technologies that can help you be more successful. My name is Rob Straight. I'm a product manager for the OpenEdge product line at Progress Software. So in order to set some context around the type of change that ultimately affects your applications, let's start with a short discussion on global interconnectivity. As we all know from both our professional and our personal lives, the world continues to be increasingly interconnected. It's more and more common, for example, for people to be working remotely rather than in a central office. Phone calls are quite often made over the internet. You can check your airline miles, you can do your banking, you can update your Facebook or LinkedIn accounts, and much more all online. Some recent research that highlights this, as described by Neil Ward-Dutton of MWD Advisors, is that by 2016, the annual global IP traffic is forecasted to be 1.3 trillion gigabytes. So that's a big number. And to put it into perspective, the projected increase in a single year, 2015 to 2016, is equal to the entire IP traffic that's been generated through 2011. I mean, that's enormous. It's growing exponentially. So what conclusions do we draw from this? There's probably a number of things we can kind of sort out from that particular statistic. But the key point here is that this massive growth is a single symptom of how connectivity is driving the spread of ideas, experiences, and expectations. Interconnectivity allows customers, partners, suppliers, and even your competitors to come from literally anywhere. The other thing that's important to realize is that because each business is so close to others, in a virtual sense, this speeds up the pace of change. In other words, ideas are spreading faster. As the pace of change increases, businesses are finding it challenging to keep up. Without sufficient agility, they risk becoming irrelevant. Now, some may be thinking that all of this change is normal and expected, and that it really doesn't impact your particular business. So another symptom of the ever-increasing pace of change is the average longevity of companies in the U.S. Standard & Poor's stock market index of 500 large companies. So in the graph, we can see that the cycle of when companies are born, grow, and die is increasing at a faster and faster rate. So if we look back 100 years ago, that life-to-death cycle was approximately at 50 years. Today, if we look at what's happening, that cycle is down to about 15 years. So things are happening very quickly. Companies are born, they live, and they die very, very quickly. And why is that? It's the rate of change that's happening in the industry. So another symptom is the recent transition of assets that are held by companies and how they're measured. So if we go back to 1974, and again, if we look at the Standard & Poor's 500 as our benchmark, at that time, about 83% of company value was attributed to physical assets, with the remainder to intangible assets, and that would include things like intellectual property and knowledge. Now, if we fast forward to 2005, those percentages had completely reversed. About 80% of company value was attributed to intellectual property and knowledge, and the remainder was physical assets. So in a short span of 20 to 30 years, there's been a huge change in how companies are valued. And being in the business of owning things is not where companies want to be. It's difficult to be profitable that way. Now, as we look ahead, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, the key for businesses is to be able to get knowledge out of people's heads and make it operational in business systems in a consistent, reliable, and scalable way, all while continuing to allow people to be creative. This is what companies need to strive for. So digital transformation started with company websites and e-commerce sites many years ago, and this was all positioned really at the edges of the business. So this was how companies engaged with the internet technology. They provided informational web pages. They may have been selling products through their e-commerce sites on the web. Over time, the digital transformation has made its way into the very core of how organizations work. As an analogy, we can take a look at how coffee interacts with a sugar cube. First, the coffee just colors the outside of the cube, but it is still a sugar cube. And this is very similar to how interconnectivity was first introduced at the edge of businesses through the web and e-commerce sites. However, over time, the coffee eventually breaks down the structure of the sugar and the cube dissolves away. In a very similar way, digital transformation is breaking down established organizational structures and patterns of getting things done. There is massive change happening, and your choice is to grab hold with both hands and remake your organization and drive performance, or, alternatively, to sit back and wait for your organization to potentially dissolve around you. So as one example, we can take a look at what has been happening with cell phones and smart devices. And people might have thought originally that when these devices came out, hey, we now have a smaller form factor where we can simply, display forms and graphics. But these devices enable you to fundamentally reshape the way that knowledge work gets done. It's much, much more than simply painting pictures on a smaller device. And by reshaping the way that knowledge work gets done, you can refactor your business processes. So as we all know, because most of us use these types of devices, what are you enabled and empowered to do? Well, you can capture images and video. You couldn't do that before, along with the audio. You can know where you are located, and that information can be very useful in a number of applications. It can tell you what direction you're facing. You can operate the device using gestures. You can do things with digital signatures. You can receive automatic notifications, and you can take actions based on those notifications. And very, very recently, you can actually carry out many of these activities in the form factor of a wearable watch. So the technology continues to change, and what we're finding is this technology is a powerful disruptor for the way a business is run. Now let's begin to think about some of the technologies we have to address this rate of change and this interconnectivity that's taking place. And in particular, I'm going to focus in today on business process management and business rules management. Now work, and that's how things get done, is really ripe for reinvention. Work can be broken down into 6 dimensions, as we're showing here in this diagram, both in terms of how we do work and how we can improve work. They are what needs to be done, who is going to be responsible for getting it done, when and potentially what is the sequence of steps of getting the work done, where the work will be accomplished, why we're doing it, and how. Now, to be effective in dealing with the change that your organization is faced with, you should be looking for ways to change each of these work dimensions in order to lower cost and to increase customer satisfaction. Now, if we think about the various dimensions of accomplishing work, and keeping in mind the shift from physical to intellectual assets that are embodied in people, what can you gain by making use of business process management and business rules management? BPM and BRM are sometimes thought of as the same thing, but really, they can be used effectively alone or together. BPM, Business Process Management, focuses mostly on what work is being done, including the sequence of steps required and the people and the systems who are responsible for carrying those steps out. Business Rules Management, or BRM, focuses mostly on how work is being done. And you can see in the chart that they really address all of the different aspects of the work that needs to be accomplished. From a process perspective, it's more leaning towards the type of work and the sequencing of work that needs to be done. And rules, really talks more about, again, how the work is going to be accomplished. Now, both of these are very similar in that the overall goal is to abstract logic from the core application into a container that allows logic and the inevitable changes that will be made to it to be managed in a more agile, straightforward manner. And when dealing with the change, collaboration is encouraged between the stakeholders. The subject matter experts, the line of business managers, your customers, all of the people involved in accomplishing work. Taken all together, we currently find ourselves in a situation where there's a mix of technological, economic, and political factors all coming together in what can be viewed as a perfect storm. Customers, partners, suppliers, and competitors are able to come from anywhere due to increased interconnectivity. The environment is more complex, more unpredictable, and more susceptible to rapid change. all of these factors are having an undeniable effect on businesses today. You can't simply rely on the old ways of creating business applications, such as the traditional separation of business logic from the UI from the database. It simply is not enough for today's world. You need to be building for the future and for the people who are your most important business asset. And finally, you can't continue to rely on rigid application structures in this kind of environment. You end up with brittle, chaotic structures that hold you back and frustrate everyone. What is needed is a flexible, agile way for you and your application users to deal with all of the change that you are faced with. So as we look at how do we bring all these concepts together, there are a number of factors that you would like to consider. So for instance, you currently may not have the visibility you need into the business day to day, week to week, month to month. And this lack of visibility into the current status of business processes tends to be a drag on the system. Without visibility, it's hard to know if you're staffed appropriately and meeting the demand placed on the business. It's also very challenging to identify where improvements are needed to the business processes. Silos of automation occur when various parts of the organization are not working collaboratively together. Sometimes they simply do not have the tools and the capabilities to effectively work together. Finally, the business logic you have today is locked in your code. Making changes means you have to go through a software development lifecycle. And we all understand what that process is. It may require some re-architecture. You probably have to do some rewriting or adding additional new code. You have to do extensive testing, and eventually you have to have a formal product release. And as we all know, it's difficult to do this quickly. It typically doesn't happen within a few days or weeks. More likely the time frame will be on the scale of months or potentially even years. So the question really is, given your current situation, how can you be more agile and responsive to change? So if you consider the players within the organization who are impacted by this change, what can you expect from the new technology and how can it help you? For instance, if you're a CEO, what if you could realize the full potential of your application investment and grow your business dramatically with a new class of business applications? If you're a business analyst, what if you could better collaborate more effectively and efficiently with internal organizations or with the ultimate customers you serve on the processes that they're going to be using and the decision rules that are associated with the business? If you're a developer, what if you could work in a more productive environment with a familiar integrated development environment like OpenEdge, in addition to new tools and capabilities to utilize BPM and BRM? And finally, if you're a sales executive or line of business owner, what if you could give your customers or users more structure and help them to define processes that will make them more efficient and that will provide them with more visibility into the state of their business? So let's take a look at what some of the key components of OpenEdge BPM are. And it starts with the concept of modeling. The idea here is you want to be able to define in a graphical, pictorial form the process steps that people would go through to accomplish a work task. And the process modeler is simply a tool to help you diagram out your business processes. It doesn't take any particular technical skills. Literally anyone can make use of this tool. You can think of it more as a drawing tool than anything else. It has a lot of capability as far as not only sequencing the steps in your process, but adding in decision points and branching points and all the things you would expect that would be required to fully define a process. You make use of your own terminology. So whatever it is in your particular vertical, that's how you label your tasks. It's really free form and it's whatever you want it to be. In a very similar fashion, and I will mention, by the way, that the Process Modeler is a tool that we do offer at no cost. So if you're interested in taking a look at this and trying it out, you can simply download it from Progress at no charge. Now, going through the effort of modeling your business processes actually has value. You may not have good documentation today on what your current as-is business process is. And there's actually value in taking some time to sit down and actually make a diagram of what that is. What's the value? Well, it's twofold. One, you now have some documentation that shows you the current state of your application. That can be very useful for the development team and business leaders to understand what are we currently doing in business processes. And the second thing is it may then lead you to observations of where you can be more efficient in your business processes, so leading you to optimizations. So modeling is kind of a key concept and first step. From there, we want to take these models, which really in reality are simply diagrams, and we want to turn them into something that you can execute in your production environment. So there are tools built into Progress Developer Studio, starting with OpenEdge 11.3, that allow you to take these models and to then make them so that they can be executable. Now what do I mean by executable? It means that the business server can create instances of this model, instantiate them, if you will. It can sequence through the steps that you've defined, and where you have defined places where you need to execute OpenEdge business logic, it can manage calling the OpenEdge application server, executing that business logic, and getting back results. So this is the place from a developer perspective where we begin to take the process models, again, which are diagrams, and enrich them to turn them into something that's executable. Now, when you're ready to run a production, there is a server that understands how to instantiate and execute these business models. So this diagram is meant to depict you may have a single process you've defined that in this particular example has been instantiated 4 separate times and has a thread of execution in 4 different sequences. So the business process server is responsible then for instantiating and running these business models, keeping track of where you are for each instantiation, at what step you're at, who you're waiting on for the next step, what information is required, and so on. So it sequences you through those steps. Now, related to that is the visibility into what's happening in the execution of the business processes. And this is exposed through a portal. This particular portal is highly configurable, and you would envision it would be used by typically managers and administrators who are accomplishing a couple of different goals. Administrators may be interested in making sure that the day-to-day business processes are running efficiently, they're not stuck in any particular process step. As a simple example, perhaps someone is taking a vacation day and the tasks assigned to them are backing up in their queue, thereby holding up the rest of the execution of the business process. So an administrator may recognize that and may reassign some of those tasks to someone else who happens to be working that particular day. The other major thing we're trying to accomplish, and this may more often be accomplished by business analysts or management, is getting a pulse on what is happening overall in our production systems. So are our business processes running efficiently? Can we identify bottlenecks? Are there opportunities to optimize the business processes over time? All of that visibility is provided through the configurable portal. Now, the last piece is really the OpenEdge application server. So I mentioned before that as part of your process, you may want to call OpenEdge business logic to accomplish some particular task. That business logic runs on the OpenEdge application server as it always has. And the application server then may be interacting, of course, with existing OpenEdge user interfaces, be it whatever technology you have chosen. So those are really the key components of OpenEdge BPM. We have modeling, we have development capabilities, and then we have production runtime capabilities with the aspects of gaining visibility into the system. Now, if we transition slightly to the rules side, so business rules management, we have a separate tool, Progress Corticon, which is geared towards making it very simple to define and make sure we have a complete set of business rules that we'd like to apply to our particular situation. Now, it's implemented in the style of a spreadsheet, which is very familiar to many people, and typically people are very comfortable and find that very easy to use. And that's what you're seeing here in this particular diagram. So with a minimum of training, and really without requiring any software developer skills, users can quickly and easily define the rules that they want to apply to their business decision making. So I'm going to point out just a few aspects of this particular tool. Here we're seeing that the rule statements are provided by rule documentation. They provide rule documentation and traceability. So you'll see these are written in English, right? These are not software artifacts. It's not ABL you're coding here. You're simply saying in the first example that applicants for this particular life insurance policy who skydive have a high risk rating. You just simply say that in words. We also then are able to define the vocabulary that applies to and is consistent with your particular business. So whatever vertical you find yourself in, you define the vocabulary that makes sense for you. So in this particular case, we're talking about people. We may be concerned about the age. We certainly want to keep track of their name. There may be some other identifying information. We may be assigning, in this case, for insurance purposes, a risk rating. We may want to track some of the more risky behaviors, such as being a skydiver or other activities. Now, the tool also provides quite a comprehensive and extensible library of operators that is very similar to what you would find for Excel functions. So you can build out logical statements very quickly and easily, just as you would for any spreadsheet. And finally, we define the actual rules with simple dragging and dropping. So this particular example shows in column 1 a single rule defined. The rule itself in this example says that if it's true that the applicant is a skydiver, then down below you see the application risk rating is set to high. In the second column, it says if the application age is less than 35, and although it's hidden under the text here, we would set the applicant risk rating to low. And it's as simple as that. So we tie together the textual description of the rule statements down below with the actual rule definitions up above. Very quick and easy to use, all drag and drop. And again, it doesn't require software engineering skills. Now, some may ask, how sophisticated of a rule set can we make? And what I want to leave you with is that this tool has been used for very simple rules definitions. It's been implemented with very complex and sophisticated rule definitions. So the example I'd like to give you, and really kind of the showcase of the Corticon tool, is eBay. And eBay is an online marketplace. Many of us are familiar with this. Many of you have actually made use of it, maybe to sell personal items or to buy personal items. Now, eBay uses Corticon to analyze millions of transactions on a daily basis. And it's doing this to determine if the payment should be held in escrow as opposed to paid directly to the seller. And why are they doing this? This is an effort by eBay to prevent fraud. So I leave you with a thought here that, here's a large organization carrying out transactions for millions and millions of sales per day and applying rule sets and making decisions, virtually instantaneously. So you can define literally any rule set, and it can be scalable to very, very large numbers of transactions. Now, just to kind of drive home the rules development and what it means as compared to how we've done things in the past, consider now if you're developing software that's going to implement rules, or perhaps you're modifying software that already has rules already implemented in it, what's the life cycle you have to go through? There's a specification typically of what you want to accomplish. There's some design work, there's coding, testing, there's integration, and then finally deployment. Very traditional software development life cycle. And all the things highlighted kind of in the pinkish color require software engineering skills. And as we all know from our daily experience, the software development life cycle is something that quite often takes, months, if not a year or more, to execute. So if we think about the rate of change of what's happening in the business community today, can you really afford to spend 6, 9, 12 months making modifications to your rules when really you need to get them modified today or tomorrow or next week? Now, by using Corticon and by abstracting out the rules logic from the code into the Corticon tool, we have measured and seen that development organizations can reduce the development lifecycle by up to 90%. And why is that? It's because you don't have to go through the coding phase. You simply open up the tool, which again is the Excel spreadsheet paradigm. You make the modifications that you like to make. That could take you a few minutes. It might take you a few hours, maybe up to a day. But it doesn't take weeks of coding and testing and so on. You can then integrate that back into your execution flow and deploy that right out. So literally changes can be made in minutes or hours as opposed to weeks or months. And that's the big advantage of business rules management systems in general and Corticon in particular. So let's tie this all together. Again, starting with OpenEdge 11.3 and versions beyond, business process management and business rules management technologies have been tied together with OpenEdge. You can repurpose existing business logic for use in workflows and turn decision logic into externalized rules. And I really want to emphasize it's the reuse and repurposing that's important. You're not starting from scratch. You're not throwing away your existing business logic. You're simply repurposing it in a different way. By doing this, removing business logic and removing rules logic out of your code, you're ultimately reducing the volume of code. And by doing that, of course, that allows you to achieve a significant reduction in development time and costs. Now, using OpenEdge BPM, end users can operate in a more structured environment, and you have the visibility to track and monitor performance of the system and to help identify areas of optimization. It is seamlessly implemented, it's easy to manage and maintain, and again, provides you with that visibility into the state of the business. With Corticon, it is easy to both implement and to make changes to rules on the fly. It makes complex technologies easy to use. OpenEdge developers simply pass data to the rules manager, and they get back the results of applying the rule set to the data. By combining the core technology of OpenEdge with the new technology of business process management and the Corticon business rules management, we're really living up to the historical tradition of making complex technology easy to use. As we begin to wind up, in order to bridge the gap between applications and outcomes, you really want to consider achieving capability to coordinate work across teams and silos. And you need to have detailed visibility into the workflows and business rules that are executed in your production environment. That visibility is critical. You want to make it fast and easy to change behaviors and policies and so on, keeping up with the rate of change that your business is faced with. And finally, you want to track and manage business performance over time. So how can you get started? We recommend kind of a three-phase approach. First, take a look at modeling of your current as-is business processes and rules. There's value in documenting what you're already doing, both for communication and alignment within your organization, and also to begin to help you to identify areas of potential improvement. Once you've mastered modeling, you might then want to consider doing monitoring of your existing OpenEdge application. So monitoring simply says that you take your existing OpenEdge application and you identify or mark within that application the code that is carrying out process steps and the code that is carrying out business rules logic. Now, these are already typically hard-coded into your application. So once marked, the BPM system can then monitor that execution in your production environment. You'll, of course, need a process model to go along with that. But once you've accomplished that, and really this is a very straightforward, low invasive kind of a change, you then immediately have visibility into the operation of your current application. So you can begin to monitor exactly what's going on with your current working application. And then really the final step is, once you've gained that experience and confidence, you want to then consider to begin building new workflows and externalizing rules logic. So in some cases, that's going to replace your hard-coded logic, and in other cases, maybe you want to consider adding brand new capabilities and features to your applications. So kind of a three-step process to get started. It's really not an all or nothing. You can start small and kind of grow over time. So with that, I would encourage you, if you're interested in getting more information, to please visit the Progress website or certainly consult with your Progress account manager. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time and attention today.